This bright orange coaster on the hill is the calling card of the Great Escape, a beautiful historical park next to Lake George in upstate New York. The parking lot is across the highway, and you get to this section over a bridge and then down this ramp toward the entrance. And here we are. Hi, Karen. As is the current practice at Six Flags parks, the security gates are before you get to the ticket gates. So we're just going to advance past the ticket gates and right on to the main entrance. It's a really charming entrance to the park. It sort of reminds me of a mini Busch Gardens or a Hershey Park, where you have this quaint sort of rustic look. That's Sasquatch in the background. Now there's a path that leads down into what they call the Hot Rods area. And this is actually the main entrance into the park. There's the exit, which we'll look at later on. And we're going to walk through here. Now, the park has lots of intertwining paths. We're going to follow a sort of clockwise path around the park. As you can see, there are little shops along here. Great Escape began life in 1954 as Storytown, USA, the first theme park in the United States before Disney. It was created by the legendary Charlie Wood. Now, you see we come to an intersection here, and paths branch off to the left and to the right. If we go right, we'll go into that hot rod area, which we'll see a little later. And instead, we're going to go left. And you can see that little castle in the background. That's one of the remaining pieces from the old Storytown days. Carousel is beautifully placed right up on the midway here. And there are many other paths we can take from there, but I want to take you in a different direction. An interesting little sort of hidden path up here to the left. It's a hike, but it's a pretty charming walk. The park originally was designed for children, and it focused on Mother Goose nursery rhymes. So you'll see a lot of references to that throughout the park. It was later expanded with a ghost town area, which we'll see in a little bit. But right now in front of us is the home of the old woman in the shoe. Off to the left you can see the Sky Ride. And there's Cinderella's castle. Now in the past you can see that pumpkin coach. They used to actually give rides. There was a horse that pulled the pumpkin coach around the castle, and children could sit with Cinderella in the pumpkin coach and ride around the castle. Well, they don't pull the coach anymore, but you can still have a little photo op there with Cinderella. Now, I'm not sure what those benches are for. I think maybe just to give old people like me a way to sit down after climbing that hill. So let's head down this hill. And you can see there are all these buildings that are kid-sized. So adults have a hard time fitting in them, but they're perfect for kids. And they have a lot of wonderful details inside. For instance, there's a little church you can see in the distance, and the church actually has a little miniature wooden organ in it. If you have kids that are around, 6 to 10 years old, they would be in heaven here. It's a park built just for them. So let's take a peek inside the church so you can see what it looks like. So as you can see, there are a lot of these buildings all over. There's a jail where you can stick your kids behind bars and things like that. This cave that you see here usually has a waterfall running over the top of it. It's really nice. But the more important thing about that sort of cave is it is one of the entrances to Ghost Town. And again, it's a great entrance for kids. It sets the mood really well. And we'll take a walk through there. When you get in here, normally you would see the waterfall cascading through these windows on the left. And the passage here is pretty steep and it's very dark. And as you can see, there is light at the end of the tunnel. And this will bring us up to the Ghost Town area, which is basically located above the Steamin' Demon roller coaster that we saw at the beginning of this video. On the left is the Condor, a very tall spinning tower ride. And over on the left, in this little nook over here, is the actual entrance to the Steamin' Demon. And there's an eatery in front of us. There's the entrance. And there's the Steamin' Demon that we saw at the beginning of the video. As you'll see, this area, of course, is a Western theme. For many, many years, they had a show here with Windy Bill McKay, who would help kids track down the bad guys. Windy Bill's Western World is a gift shop. The Marshall's shop next to it has a display about the history of Storytown. There's a Dodgem car arena. In front of us is Desperado Plunge, which is a really nice flume ride. Also, what used to be in front of us was one of my favorite rides in the park, the Ghost Town train, which is no longer there. It was removed to make room for this, the Canyon Blaster, which is a pretty short aero mine train. It's basically two helixes connected by a lift hill. Charlie Wood owned another park in upstate New York, Fantasy Island, which is still there, called Martin's Fantasy Island in Grand Island, New York. And he also owned a little park called Gaslight Village, just down the street from Great Escape. So he was quite involved in the amusement industry. And in 1996, he sold the park to Premier Parks. And they're familiar to many of you who know Six Flags because Premier Parks in 1998 bought the entire Six Flags chain and rebranded all their parks. So this became Six Flags The Great Escape. For a slight time in between, when Premier Parks just had bought a bunch of different parks, they had renamed a lot of their parks to The Great Escape. So Riverside Park in Agawam, Massachusetts became Riverside The Great Escape. And Elitch Gardens in Denver became Elitch Gardens The Great Escape. That didn't last too long. Once they became Six Flags, everything's got rebranded. But I think it's really interesting that at Great Escape, the branding is still Great Escape. It says a Six Flags park on the sign, but they're not really calling it Six Flags Great Escape. And you'll see that as we walk around, it really has a different character from a lot of other Six Flags parks. This particular park is proud of its roots as Storytown, USA. Now over on the right, the Pink Whale is a famous attraction from the old days. It used to be in a different area of the park and it got reconstructed here a few years ago. Interestingly, it was originally a depiction of the biblical story of Jonah and the whale, and here it's just called Moby Dick now, but Moby Dick is a white whale, so maybe kids are colorblind. There are a few games over here on the left. That took the place of a petting zoo that used to be there. There's a nice view of Cinderella's castle. And notice these little figurines scattered throughout the park. Again, holdovers from the old Storytown days. There's the Knave of Hearts. There's three little kittens. And there's the pumpkin coach, which you remember we saw when we looked down from up by the old woman in the shoe. And now in front of us, besides funnel cakes, is the Grand Carousel, which we saw when we first entered the park. So we've made a big circle from Ghost Town all the way around. That big tower you see in front of us is a dive show that's currently in progress. This same dive show has been going on for close to 20 years at least, and the routines don't change much. But the kids really like it. Now notice over here there's yet another little piece of the Storytown Village area, and that also would take you into that hot rod area, which we'll get to. Also there is the Jolly Tree Theater, which has musical reviews. You'll notice that everything in the park is brightly colored. Let's take a look and see if this guy's going to jump. Well, I guess not. Let's move on. So this path brings us to another intersection. You see that arched bridge on the right. That also leads into the hot rods area. And we're instead going to bear left over here. You can see the Primo's Pizza. That's a pretty good pizza shop. Now the area we're heading to used to simply be a continuation of the storybook area. They had a Jack and Jill that used to tumble down a hill, and more of similar buildings that you saw. This station, the ranger station that's in front of us, used to be the Little Red Schoolhouse, and you can still see the bell up in the schoolhouse, which kids could actually go into the house, they could ring the bell. This was also once the home of the Pink Whale. For a while this was rethemed. It was basically gutted and rethemed into Looney Tunes when Six Flags took over. Now it's a sort of generic kiddie area called Timbertown. And it's nicely landscaped. Up here on the left is the Timbertown Grill and Marketplace, one of the larger eateries at the park. And this one serves really good black bean veggie burgers. And over there on the right is a little spray area for kids. This section is one of the only dead ends in the park. And I'm taking you down it because I wanted to show you this odd-looking building in front of us. Another historical remnant of the old Storytown days. This used to be Jungle Land, which was a pretty fun walk-through with a rope bridge and animated crocodiles and elephants. Well, it was shut down when the park became Six Flags. They rebranded it as a Looney Tunes area, and I had never seen it open after that. And now it's rebranded as Timbertown Trail, but it still was locked up when we were there. And it wasn't even on the park map. Although you could see the trail on the map, there was no attraction listed. So I'm not sure if they're opening it up again, but it was a fun little attraction for kids. And as you can see, the usual attractions that would be in Kiddieland, a little miniature train and miniature swings. That swing ride, by the way, used to have the Tasmanian Devil on the top when it was a Looney Tunes area, and it was called Taz's Tornado. That yellow structure you see in the distance is Screaming Eagles, which is a beautifully situated flying scooter ride. And this pink house is another structure from the Storytown days That used to be Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Every building has a number above it, and I'm not sure what the significance of the numbers are. I'd never seen those before. So we'll head out of Timbertown now and follow this bridge across the little river here and into the Fest area. That big yellow and red coaster that you see is Flashback, which is the stock Vekoma Boomerang roller coaster. And as you can see, there's plenty of landscaping all over, beautiful flowers and plantings. There go the swan boats, which we'll be looking at later. Another wonderful throwback to the old Storytown days. Let's pretend Harry Potter's going to Hogwarts for the first time. Dun, 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 bum, ba-dum, bum, bum, bum. No castle, though. That's another example of the wonderful family attractions here. Again, you know, my focus is always on things families can do together, and there's plenty of those type of rides at Great Escape. So when you see that lion drinking a beer, you know you've reached the Fest area. So again, there are lots of paths here splitting off. We're going to stay to the left. There's Attitudes, which is a little clothing shop. There's the Screaming Eagles. That used to be the site of a 180-degree theater. And the Screaming Eagles looks so much better than that theater, which just had an ugly white dome. This area on the right used to be a Trabant. And I don't know why it was taken out and just filled in with mulch, but there you have it. And here's one of my favorite attractions in the park, and it was closed for many years and they just reopened it. It's Allison Wonderland, where kids can actually pretend they're going down the rabbit hole and becoming part of the Alice in Wonderland story. So let's go down the hole here. And as you can see, there's really not much here except for little displays that you can look at, basically telling the story of Alice in Wonderland. But again, it's a wonderful distraction for kids. And where did that smile come from? Of course, it's the Cheshire Cat. Notice instead of smoking a hookah, the caterpillar's playing a flute, trying to keep it family friendly there. And there's the Mad Hatter. And that's Alice in Wonderland. one of the things that I find really charming about this park. Over on the right is the Skillet Marketplace, which serves fajitas and quesadillas. And the two white towers that you can see there, that's the Sky Coaster. And inside the building here are a bunch of games. On the left is the Fest House, which is another big eatery. Now, as you can see, the Midway continues straight on down, but we're going to take a left over here because there's something I want to show you. The station over here on the right is the Alpine Bobsled, which is a rare Intamin bobsled ride. That's the exit you're looking at. The entrance is around the other side. This used to be a little miniature golf course here, and that was removed several years ago. They had a rock wall there for a while. And what you're looking at now is Raging River, which is a really nice raft ride. A little too cloudy that day for my taste, but you will get drenched on that ride. And in front of us is the park's giant Ferris wheel. If you were to continue along the path that turns to the left, that is a dead end, but it gives you a really nice overview of the raft ride. You can watch the boats go by. But I want to take you down this path. This takes you to the picnic groves, so if you have an outing, this most likely will be where it is. There is also the huge wave pool down this section, which is part of Splashwater Kingdom, which is the big water park section. That sort of rumbling noise that you can hear in the background is the machinery for the wave pool. But the real reason I'm taking you down here is because just a little ways down here is a pathway that leads alongside one of the greatest attractions in the park and one of the greatest roller coasters ever built. Now, it looks like a lot of these buildings are new since I was last here. There's a whole sort of restroom area here. But I think we should be able to get through along this section here. And you can see the track of the coaster over there. And no. This takes you into the wave pool. But that's it. So let's double back. And we'll go around the restroom. Dum-de-dum-de-dum-de-dum-de-dum. And here we are. No, they blocked it off. Well, what you're looking at is the turnaround of the Comet. So we're going to have to double back here. This turned out to be a dead end. It never used to be, but it is now. Just so you know. The Comet was the reason I first came to this park. It began life in 1927 as the legendary Crystal Beach Cyclone at Crystal Beach Park in Ontario, Canada. The Crystal Beach Cyclone was one of the three Traver triplets, as they're called. Harry Traver decided to build what they called Cyclone safety coasters, which were the first real wood-tracked, steel-structured roller coasters. And the ride, the Crystal Beach Cyclone, was so severe that legend has it they had to keep a nurse on duty at the exit platform because riders would get off with broken ribs and snapped collarbones and all sorts of injuries. It was an incredibly vicious ride. In fact, the forces on the ride were so strong that bolts would snap off of the track as the train went by. Not exactly the greatest piece of engineering, but an absolutely amazing ride to look at. So because it was nice to look at and not nice to ride, ridership dropped off, and eventually the maintenance costs were so high compared with ridership that Crystal Beach decided to take it out. But that was in 1946 during the Second World War, and there wasn't enough money nor supplies to go around. So they went to one of my favorite designers, Herb Schmeck of the Philadelphia Toboggan Company, and said to him, "Can you just take what we've got and give us a new roller coaster?" So because it was all a steel structure, Schmeck was able to basically use it like a Lego set and take the pieces and rearrange them into a different configuration. And he produced what was probably the greatest roller coaster, wooden roller coaster ever built, the Comet. And it sat on the shores of Lake Erie for about a half century until the park closed. And when it did, Charlie Wood, who populated his park here at Great Escape with lots and lots of rides that he got at auctions, he knew that this ride was going up for auction, and he bought it. And he dismantled it and then put it in storage at Fantasy Island. And so a lot of people thought it would be reconstructed at Fantasy Island, but it ended up getting rebuilt here and opened in 1994. And Wood and also the general manager at the time, Tom Wages, involved the coaster enthusiast community in the reconstruction. So the rebuilding was done right. They did a phenomenal job, and it instantly became my favorite roller coaster. Then a couple years later, the park was sold to Premier Parks, and the ride was still good, but when Six Flags took over, through the different managements of Six Flags, it started to get a little rough and fell out of favor. This season, when I came back to the park, it was in phenomenal shape again, so I'm glad to see the park is keeping it up. Now, there's the entrance to the bobsleds, if it were open. Over here is a go-kart track. That's an upcharge. And then in front of us is the path going up into the water park area, Splashwater Kingdom. But we'll keep curving around on this path here toward the Comet. Now, originally, when the Comet first opened, it was surrounded by newly planted trees, and it was stunning to look at against the Adirondack Mountains. You had the whole long white structure of the ride against the forest in the background, and it was clearly visible. But over the past, 20-something years, it has become hidden by most of the trees, and it's very hard to find. I mean, it was put way at the back of the park to begin with, so you had to do a long hike to get to it. And now, even though you're hiking toward it, you don't even know where it is. You have to listen for the rush of the train as it goes by. So that path over on the left would take you down toward the wave pool section of the water park. It's where we saw those kids coming up from when I got stuck at that dead end. They'd come down that path. And there's a nice overview of that section of the park. And there you can see the Comet going around the first turnaround there. This is Black Cobra, which is a pitch black water slide. It's completely dark, you can't see a thing. In front of us now is Extreme Supernova, which is a spin and barf ride. And of course, since it's a Six Flags park, they're playing popular music, so I had to reverse the audio. Ever since it opened, the Comet has been renowned for its lift hill because they programmed it so the chain speeds up as you get near the top. It's pretty thrilling. And there it is. For coaster enthusiasts, this is somewhat of a pilgrimage. This is a legendary roller coaster that's been beautifully preserved and is definitely worth a trip to the park. In fact, I'd say it's worth going out of your way to come and experience this ride. It's an amazing, exhilarating experience. So now we're going to double back and we're going to take a look at the water park section, Splashwater Kingdom. So as you see, the park is pretty extensive. It's a lot of property to cover. And we haven't even finished yet. There's still one area of the park we haven't explored, which we'll get to in a little bit, besides the water park. And you'll also notice there are a fair number of hills in the park. So it's a lot of walking. There really isn't any transportation per se. The Sky Ride is only a round trip. You go out and you come back to the same point. And the Storytown train is the same way. You go out and you come back to the same point. And the Swan boats are the same way. You go out and you come back to the same point. So even though there are transportation style rides in the park, they don't really get you anywhere. But they are enjoyable. So we're coming up now into the Splashwater Kingdom area. And as you can see, Splashwater Kingdom is bisected by the path that leads to the Comet. So it's two separate sort of small parks. This is the Buccaneer Beach section, which is pretty extensive. You can see the big funnel slide in the background. So now we'll go back down, and there's an area just below us on the left that's another Kiddieland section. It used to be themed to the Wiggles when it was early Six Flags, and now it's basically the Kidsopolis theme that Six Flags has at many of their parks. I actually like hearing this music backwards. It's sort of like trance. So here we are in Kidsopolis, and as you can see, it's a pretty typical rides. There's another little spray park and some concessions. So we'll continue back on the Midway. We're now in sort of the central eastern section of the park heading south. And as you can see up here by the funnel cake stand, there's a path leading off toward the east. So we're going to take that and wander through that section. There are a lot more rides in there. And there's the Sky Coaster, named Daredevil Dive. And then there's a big building at the back here, which I've never seen used in all the years I've been at the park. It used to be for outings. And you'll notice all the shade in the park too, which is really nice on a hot day. We didn't have to worry about that the day we were there, but on a sunny day it's a welcome relief. This is the Cannonball Express in front of us. And there's that game booth we saw earlier. And then up here on the left, that big dome that you see, that's Blizzard, and it's an indoor scrambler. And they call it a family ride, but if I were to go on it, I'm afraid my lunch would be all over the arena. And there in the distance you can see the Screaming Eagles. We're going to continue along this path. There are a couple more rides out this way. Now, I had considered speeding up some of this walking footage, but I really want to give you a sense of the amount of time it takes to get through this park. It is pretty big. So this ends the eastern area of the Midway at this point, and it ends at the Flying Trapeze, which is a yo-yo, a swing ride. You can see the Flashback boomerang coaster there. And in front of us now is the station for the Sky Ride, which is a nice peaceful trip over the Storytown area. So now we're going to head back over that bridge by Timbertown. And in front of us you can see that inebriated lion. And as you might suspect, given that there's a fest area, the park does host, and it's done for a long time, an Oktoberfest celebration. And after that, of course, they have the typical Fright Fest for Halloween. Much of it is geared toward kids, since it is a family park. But obviously, Oktoberfest isn't geared at kids because they probably don't want drunken children wandering around the park. All right, and on our right is that dive show that we saw earlier. There's the Flashback over on the left, and the Sky Ride above us. And so we're going to take that arched bridge over into the Hot Rod USA area. That big circle in front of us is Greased Lightnin, which is a Larson giant loop that populates most Six Flags parks. The booth that was in front of us there on the right was a cotton candy stand and a drink stand, and it also has Cold Stone Creamery. So if you want some ice cream, there you go. There's the Storytown train station. But you can't get there from here. The actual entrance to the station is on the other side of the tracks. So what you would have to do is go around this fencing here and then into the station on the other side. There's the entrance to Flashback. And here's the track for Thunder Alley, which is a really nice sort of antique car ride with 1950s styled sports cars. It's great for kids because they made the track follow Route 9 out there. So as the kids are on the outside edge of the track, they think they're actually driving on the highway. Now this huge empty area here used to house this big round building, a concession building, that looked sort of like an old 1950s drive-in. And that was removed, and now it's nothing. There used to be a spinning car on the top of that building, and that has been incorporated into the tracks of Thunder Alley. And there's Sasquatch, and there they go. And here's the actual entrance to the Swan boats. Now over on the right, a little earlier, you saw that bridge going across to the little Storytown area down there. That's one way you could get back to that area, and here's another way. This section here brings you right back to the main entrance to the park, and that formally ends our trip to the Great Escape. For years, it was one of my all-time favorite parks. It sort of fell out of favor during the early Six Flags years, but it looks like the management is back on track, keeping this fun historically, but actually fun in a modern way as well. So it's great for families, great for teens. You can easily spend a whole day here. And they have wonderful gifts in the gift shop, which is what you have to go through to exit out of here, right down through there. So if you're in the Lake George area, by all means, stop by the Great Escape. You won't be bored.